This is probably a hard one to take, but nothing particularly remarkable is going to happen, or certainly nothing particularly remarkable that you'll sustain is going to happen in 8 to 12 weeks. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Smart Strength Training Podcast, the podcast that looks at popular trends through an evidence-based lens. And this is episode 15, and today we're going to take a deep dive into the most overrated and the most underrated aspects of training. So get ready for some real eye-opening insight. And this actually was a question that came up on my Q&A a few weeks ago, and I thought to myself, there's a lot of things I could discuss on this. I'm only going to get to talk through a few of them, but it made more sense to answer this in the podcast format. One thing, I've been a trainer for 23 years now. One thing that's become very, very apparent. I always think when I meet a trainer that I think, wow, they're a really good trainer. They keep things simple. They explain it in a very kind of simple manner, and they don't try and bombard people with over-the-top stuff that's just not relevant. And when I look at training online, on TikTok, on Instagram, the same thing you see is coaches get people so focused on the minutiae and they miss the big picture stuff. We become really good at majoring in the minors, and I notice this in my Q&A, people ask me questions that are just totally irrelevant to actually what they're trying to do, what their bigger question topics actually really are. So we're going to go into underrated first, and underrated is really just looking at these things that just don't matter. It often is always going to be the stuff that is just the minutiae, the niche topics that I wouldn't spend too much time thinking about. So number one is workout training splits, certainly for strength training. Now, I'll be honest and say that I have lost hours of my life arguing this topic, usually on bodybuilding.com forums and on Instagram. People often ask me, Andy, what's the best split for? Shall I do chest day, back day, leg day? Should I do upper, lower? Shall I do push-pull legs? Honestly, it doesn't actually make a huge difference. There's no best split for any one particular goal. There potentially is a way of organizing your week that will be most practical for you as a person, but there is not a global way, a universal way of splitting up your workout. The way I always coach it to my clients is, what's more important is the total amount of work you accumulate per week. So if you're thinking about this in muscle group terms, you've got your legs, you've got your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, your upper body, you've got your chest, your back, your shoulders. If you just think of all the exercise you do per week, that actually really matters. How you break it up into a workout literally doesn't make that much of a difference. We've got research on this. You can train a muscle group once per week, up to 3 times per week, and it all comes out as equivocal if the total amount of work you accumulate per body part per week stays the same. So I wouldn't ever think about training splits. And when we're in this idea of like best workout types as well, I can't not mention celebrity workouts. These kind of like celebrity endorsed apps, these 12-week summer shreds, they are actually laughable when you go and glance at them. No celebrity trainer, no trainer has the secret to success. It goes back to the idea of these splits. The total amount of work you accumulate per week, and something we'll discuss in a second, become way more important than the actual split itself. Staying on topic then with this idea of kind of like very specific exercise selection and very specific setup. Now, I'm all for a setup that maximizes the stability of the exercise and the comfort for the person that is doing it. But what I see online, and it's especially true in the lat training space, so sort of upper back, and the glute training space, that people get these, or trainers promote these really, really kind of like elaborate, sophisticated setups. And they'll maybe even use big words, and they'll tell you the reason you weren't growing your lats, or the reason you weren't growing your glutes is because you weren't doing this one specific exercise. It is utter drivel. The fact that we've had plenty of people over the last how many decades get in great shape without all these bizarre niche exercises just shows you don't necessarily need them. I do enjoy exercise technique and tweaking exercise setup. So I'm not to say that they're totally useless, but for 95% of the people that work out, they are irrelevant. They're interesting maybe for personal trainers to talk about, maybe for people in the physique athletic world that get on stage. Potentially it's useful for them. The problem I see in this is I go to lots of different gyms around the UK and around the world, and I see this stuff play out in the gym. And what I observe is people that just need to work out maybe with a bit more simplicity, just apply some effort and overload to what they're doing. But instead, I see them setting up very bizarre pulley arrangements, and they just look confused. And what I see is a lack of effort, but a lot of science playing out. And that's just not going to get you the results that you want. So my third one is staying on this idea of very specific rep and set or loading structures as a whole. People often ask, like, what's better, straight sets versus pyramid sets or reverse pyramid sets? You can do wave loading, you can do ladders, you can undulate. Now, I appreciate some of those things might not make sense, but I see it online all the time. It's like, the secret to unlocking your potential is you have to do reverse pyramids where you start with 12, then you do 10 reps, then you do 8 reps, then you do 6 reps. Or people are like, no, you have to do these like waves where you do 1, then 5, 1, then 5. Like, honestly, that kind of stuff is not that relevant. It's been researched a decent amount, and always these kind of waves or pyramids or straight sets, it always comes out as being pretty much equivocal. If you don't feel like you're seeing results, it's not because you haven't learned the best rep or loading scheme. It's probably because you haven't been patient, which actually is a bit of a giveaway for underrated things. I think it's important to understand that if I go for 1 to 5 reps, then I'm doing predominantly high load, low rep training. And that's going to be more based on strength training and strength outcomes. Whereas if I go from sort of like 6 reps to 30 reps, I'm training more volume, and that's going to be more aligned to potentially things like muscle building and hypertrophy. I think it's good to understand that. But if I'm online arguing between the difference between 2 reps and 4 reps, or between 8 versus 12 reps and what version of that is better, I mean, that is literally in the weeds, utter nonsense. Okay, next up is weight loss workouts. I mean, it's not even underrated. It's just simply not a thing. As much as exercise does burn fat, and certain forms of exercise do yield more total energy used per unit of time, and some people do seem to respond better to particular types of workouts than others, this idea of an actual weight loss focused way of training misses the mark by miles, because you have to have a conversation around overall nutrition, lifestyle and stress management, sleep and hydration, just looking after yourself. We can't sit here and say, hey, look, we can do these workouts and that's going to make you lose weight. Because when you think of how much workouts actually affect the sort of needle when it comes to weight loss, it's about sort of like between 3 and 5% of the overall picture. It literally is a really great way of spending a lot of time focusing on something that just really isn't that relevant. And on the topic of weight loss workouts, in this idea of overrated as well, things like fasted cardio versus fed cardio. Again, if you prefer one, do it, but there isn't one that's better for the goal of weight loss. You also get the 12-3-30, so 12% incline, speed 3 miles per hour for 30 minutes, or like super popular on TikTok, laughably stupid. Like, if you like doing that, great. There's no secret to that. So next up on overrated is spot reduction. This idea that we can hyper-focus on specific regions, often things like arms, abs, and glutes. We can perform a lot of very, very high rep training, and you get these words like tone, define, and sculpt laid into these areas. I always think it's quite interesting to think that we can sell to people in this industry, telling them to do high rep training, very, very specific to a certain region, to sort of like sculpt and reduce that size. Yet people are terrified of doing work on their legs to build their legs up. So why would training my legs make my legs bigger, but training my abs would make my abs skinnier and smaller? Like, it doesn't make logical sense. It's such a misleading element of training. It's massively overrated. It's not something to think about at all. And finally, supplements. Now, I'm just going to throw all supplements in the mix together, which I know that is a really broad, just lumping supplements into one category. But I find it wild how often people look to go to supplements before they're even following a program, before they're actually thinking about any kind of progression, understand how to gauge effort. Their nutrition is all over the place. They're drinking 3 to 5 times per week. Their sleep's really poor, yet they think that bringing some nutritional supplements in is going to get them that extra kick. Like, if your big rocks are not in place, and they will get you 95% of the way there. Supplements, I appreciate there are nutritional supplements that people will need based on their own individual deficiencies, but on the whole, thinking about how much money the supplement industry is worth, supplements are hugely overrated. And it's somewhere that if someone asks me about supplements, I'm always very quick to say, you need to get, or if you haven't got those big rocks in place, let's not waste your money. Let's focus on things that actually really work. Right, let's go to the underrated stuff. Now, some of this I've actually already touched on, going through the overrated, and we're going to base this around the things that we know will get people lasting results. The first up is consistently practicing and sticking to the same program over time, learning the movement, learning how to manage your body position, understanding the form, and how hard you can push that exercise. People love to bounce from celebrity workout to online program to particular classes, and they never stick to the same thing. And when people say to me, oh, I don't feel like I'm seeing progression, it's like, well, how are you going to see progression if you're never practicing the same thing? That leads nicely into this next one, logging your workouts. If you are not logging your reps performed, the weight that you lifted, and potentially also like how close to failure that was, or your exercises were, you are missing out on one of the most important elements of training as a whole. I actually had a friend come up to me last year, maybe the year before, and said to me, Andy, I know this is a really broad question, but like, what's the one thing you'd advise to make sure I can see results? I know you probably get it all the time. It's really hard to answer. It's like, it's actually not hard to answer at all. Just log your workouts, and make sure that week on week, you try to progress what you do. Next up, which actually leads into that one quite nicely, is the correct, certainly for strength training, the correct loading and the correct understanding of effort. So we want to make sure if I look around the gym, too often I see people put down their weights having completed a set, and I'm like, they look like they could have done about 5 more reps. Like, making sure people get, I appreciate injury, skill level. I totally understand that. So we do want to make sure that we're being smart with our form as we do this, but understanding that you need to be able to push those exercises hard, which is why the practicing them becomes really, really important. But applying the right amount of effort to the load selection you're using for your weights is paramount. Effort, then, the reason I put effort in here isn't because I want everyone to go redlining everything, but I see a lot of people misunderstand what effort should be. If I'm doing a high intensity interval training session or a sprint interval session, then that type of workout does need like an all out effort at what you are doing. But if you're doing zone 2 cardio, you're doing low rep strength training or any kind of strength training, you do not need to be walking out the gym in a massive pool of sweat. So understanding that what effort really means in the weights room is taking that exercise pretty close to, if not to, the point of task failure, where you really couldn't do any more work. Whereas your zone 2 effort and effort in other arenas is going to be very, very different. So understanding the type of exercises you're doing and what real effort means, because it's really common to see people turn their strength training workouts into cardio sessions thinking it's not hard enough, I'm not sweating enough, I'm going to reduce the rest period, I'm going to do more exercises per unit of time. And that is not the correct way to load and apply effort in the weights room. Next up, does lead into that one as well, is rest and recovery. Now, that rest can be resting during sets to make sure you can go again, but more importantly, just understanding that the recovery element is key. Exercise is a physical stressor placed upon the system, the muscular system, the nervous system. The body then needs to adapt to those stresses placed upon it. So we don't train, we sleep, we have good nutrition, we organize the workouts in a way that is smart, so I don't put all my leg sessions together or something. I make sure I have those gaps between my training days. And sort of circling back to this conversation on supplements, like supplements are really overrated here for recovery. We want to think of all the things you need for recovery, you have access to way outside of even touching supplements. Just making sure you have enough nutrition, your sleep quality is good, making sure you're staying hydrated. Those things are paramount. And they are often forgotten because people focus so much on the exercise portion and they forget the rest portion. Now, I'm all for, on a week that you've got a very busy weekend, front end loading your sessions and getting them in Monday through Wednesday and just getting 3 sessions back to back. Absolutely fine. But that obviously wouldn't be the most practical way of doing your workouts on a weekly basis. So making sure we think of what recovery really is. It can be multifaceted based around the idea of nutrition, sleep, hydration, but also just smart programming and positioning your workouts through a week. Next up, we have probably the most important thing: consistency and patience. Honestly, this is probably a hard one to take, but nothing particularly remarkable is going to happen, or certainly nothing particularly remarkable that you'll sustain is going to happen in 8 to 12 weeks. Progress is measured in years. And yes, people can starve themselves and make themselves look leaner for a photo shoot, but that is not something from a training standpoint that actually can be kept to. And coming back to this idea of celebrity workouts, because I saw a feature, this was in Men's Health maybe 2 weeks ago, about an actor that trained 6 hours per day, added 15 kilos of muscle in 3 months. Now, I've been training for 23 years. I've been educating myself in this arena. I honestly believed in my first 5 to 10 years that I didn't understand something, that celebrity trainers knew the trick and I was going to eventually learn these things. And what I've learned is that there's a lot of nonsense spoken in media. This actor did not gain 15 kilos of muscle by training 6 hours per day. It's either a lie or they were using steroids. If you train 6 hours per day, you go back to that idea before: how are you recovering from these workouts? There's nothing you can do outside of anabolic steroids to do that. Consistency and patience. And when you see things posted that make you feel like you're not seeing the results that you feel you should, just remember that it does take time and you do need to be patient. And then just make peace with the fact that if you apply the rules I just stated, you're consistently practicing the same exercises, you're logging your workouts, you're focusing on load selection and effort, getting quite close to failure, you're focusing on, or you at least are thinking about, rest and recovery and good nutrition and your patience, you will get where you want to go without going back to those overrated elements I spoke about already. So hopefully that was useful, and hopefully you can go through that list and just streamline what you do a little bit, taking 1 or 2 points from there and just thinking, you know what, I probably need to focus a bit more here and a bit less there. And that will get you honestly all the way you need to go to seeing great results.